In this podcast, two Gen Xers are taking a trip down memory lane, revisiting and reflecting on the cinema of the 1980s. We'll look at the hits and the flops, the studio blockbusters and art house indies, the critically acclaimed, and the universally reviled. The series is hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli, a writer and librarian, and features Dustin Morrow, a filmmaker, author, and professor of film. So pull on your legwarmers, crank up your boombox, and hop in the DeLorean. It's time for the Long Rewind. Welcome to the Long Rewind. I'm your host, Lisa. With me, as always, is Dustin. Wow. Yeah, bringing it back. So Dustin is treating us to his rendition of the Entertainment Tonight theme song. Why are you doing that, Dustin?
Because we're talking TV. It's our new podcast, Talking TV.
Oh, no.
Where we talk about all things TV.
Well, that's not
TV
quite
talking.
it, is it? Right, that's not quite it. What are we doing today?
Well, it is the beginning of a new season. As I've said from the beginning, I don't totally get what a season of podcasting is unless you're doing something really defined. Mm-hmm. But since we are doing that here, we're kicking off something that I consider to be kind of like a mini series within our series. We'll call it a season.
Okay.
So this new sort of mini season of The Long Rewind, a podcast focusing on cinema, on the film of the 1980s, will instead be detouring, not so terribly far away from its original mission, but, you know, a little ways away in the sense that we are going to be looking at television instead of film just for a finite number of episodes. And then we're going back to our comfort zone, which is 80s film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, TV is moving pictures still, and it was extremely important and influential in the 80s, right? So it bears talking about for sure.
Well, and it's obviously where we discovered many of the films that we talk
That's
about
true.
on this
Yeah,
show.
lots of films
Many
made
more
them.
than we ever saw in a theater.
That's true. It was most of our access to some degree.
Yeah.
And it's another good reason why we're calling this a season, right? Because TV back in the 80s was all about seasons.
Oh, nice.
See what I did there?
I see what you did
Yeah.
there. I like it. I saw it, I recognized it, and I liked it.
You're picking up what I'm putting down?
Yeah.
Excellent.
So what we'll do is, this will be similar to sort of what we did with, as we launched this podcast and we went through the 80s year by year to discuss the cinema of those years through using a structured format. And when we did that, I think, if I remember right, we did like noteworthy films, and then we did sort of hidden gems, which were movies you and I really liked that we thought were kind of forgotten or underappreciated.
Yep.
We looked at box office. We looked at the Oscars. We did our top 10s. Am I missing anything, or is that basically how we approached that?
I think that's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this, we also did, the other thing we did was you gave us a rundown kind of on what was going on in the world.
Context.
And we won't repeat all that, but what we will do is Lisa will give us a rundown of what some of the big events that were happening in television history in a given year. We're going to go year by year again, starting with 80 and moving to 89, and we'll do an episode for each year. And then we'll discuss the noteworthy premieres of shows from that given year. We'll look at the schedules, like specific lineups. We'll discuss whether we remember specific lineups. We'll also do a little fun thing I think we should do where we'll discuss what were you watching on a given night.
Oh, yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah. Sort of TV guide analysis.
Yeah. And then we'll look at the Nielsen ratings for that year, and we'll look at the Emmy winners for that year.
Love it.
And then we'll each do our little list of our top 5 favorite new shows from that year.
Yeah.
And then we'll sprinkle in, or maybe at the tail end, we'll do some special episodes as well. I think we have to do an episode on Saturday morning cartoons, which were huge in the 80s.
Yep.
We can do an episode on the birth of cable. We can look at HBO and MTV and cable TV. We could rerun our episodes that we did on TV, movies, and music videos.
Yes.
Which I think fit in here.
Yep.
I think we should do an episode on syndicated shows, perhaps.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was really big. Maybe an episode on game shows. Mm-hmm. Maybe an episode on talent shows, because it seemed like there were a lot of those, and those are huge right now.
That's
right?
true.
With American Idol and
so
America's Got Talent.
Dance,
So you think you can dance. Those became a primetime mainstream thing. But in the 80s, when we were young, it was like crap like The Gong Show and Star Search. And, it was
Putting on the hits. I can't wait to talk about that.
Yeah.
If you don't know what that is, get excited.
Stay tuned. Yeah. You're about to have a real YouTube
spiral.
Yeah. That's delightful.
Rabbit hole. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What I thought maybe we should do for the first episode, though, is just look sort of bird's eye view at what was going on in television in the 80s. And I'm sure a lot of this stuff will come up again and again as we move through each year. Mm-hmm. But it might be helpful just generally to give folks at home a sense of why we think this is important and worth talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, TV was always like, since it came around, it was always like the people's medium, right? It was like the mass medium. When I studied mass media in college, it was all about TV.
Yeah, well, it was the most accessible to the most people, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah.
At least network at the time.
Yeah. So when Lisa and I were kids in the 80s, there were really just 3 networks. Towards the end of the 80s, there was a 4th when Fox came in, although we'll talk about Fox when we get to the end of the 80s and what a little bit of a joke it was at the time. It was a real sort of ragtag, low budget, flying by the seat of its pants affair that was saved by a handful of shows like The Simpsons and Married with Children and America's Most Wanted. But it was pretty rough early going. But for most of the 80s, it was 3 networks. And those
the big
were
3, I think they were called,
yeah, the big
right?
3, which were CBS, NBC, and ABC. And they had dominated since the early days of television, a half century, or I guess in the 80s, it would have been like 30, 40 years before. And it was amazing how many people were watching those things when you look back at it now, because what is considered a hit show today draws the audience of like what would have been considered a flop in the 80s. Because television has become so fragmented and people have so many other options, things to view that aren't, some of which are not even television, because there's stuff like TikTok and Facebook and God
YouTube,
help us,
etc.
that other stuff. But it wasn't uncommon in the 80s for like a single episode of a show to reach like 40 million people and even up to like 60 million. At the end of the 70s, when the MASH finale aired, or maybe that was the early 80s. When did MASH go off the air? Do you remember?
It's a good question. I don't remember.
It was at the time.
I would have to guess early 80s.
It was at the time the most watched
yeah.
program of all time.
That particular episode.
And I can't remember what the ratings were for it. We could probably just Google it. But I felt like it was some just mind-boggling amount of people. Like it was like more people in the United States at the time were watching it than were not watching it, which is insane.
I think I may have the numbers and the date for you if you're interested.
Lay it on me.
Well, according to a very quick Google search, so forgive me if it's not correct, but it says it aired on February 28th, 1983, so it was in the 80s, and it drew an estimated 105.9 million viewers.
That's insane.
I mean, that's
like Super Bowl numbers.
Yeah. It's a 77% share of the television audience.
Yeah.
I mean, does
crazy.
the Super Bowl even get that today?
I think it does.
Okay.
I think maybe it gets close to that.
I was wondering if we had any numbers.
I think it's the Super Bowl is like the last program that still can draw, numbers of
anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know what we had to, if we had some numbers of stuff that's popular today to compare it to, just to give people a sense. But 105 is like almost, million is almost impossible today unless you're the Super Bowl. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
So what changed in terms of programming in the 80s? There was a real shift toward new kinds of formulas. I mean, TV was always formulaic, but the new formulas were things like primetime soap operas, which were huge, and that was stuff like Dallas and Dynasty, Knots Landing, Falcon Crest. And most of those shows were about really rich people and their rich people problems, and they were very melodramatic. And
Right.
I didn't watch them, and I didn't watch daytime soaps. I know you'd watch both, right?
I didn't really watch primetime soaps. I was a little young for them. I watched a little bit of daytime soaps, not really in the 80s, except when my mom was watching them.
Yeah,
but,
I'm just curious if there was really that big a difference, aside from budget and scale, between the daytime soaps and the primetime soaps.
It's a good question. Since I didn't watch primetime soaps, I couldn't speak to that. I would guess that's the only difference, though, is probably production value. I also wonder, like, for those who haven't seen that sort of thing today, I wonder if you could find an analog in some of the things like some of the big cable shows or big streaming shows now, like White Lotus or something. I mean, I don't know, the tenor of that might be different, but it is about rich people.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen White Lotus, but it looks like a big soap opera to me.
Although I guess maybe also something like the Western show that I can't think of. It's like a family.
Yellowstone.
Yeah, so I mean, that's sort of a family dynasty.
Seen, and that's a total soap opera.
Yeah, so something like that might, just to give people who haven't seen these shows a sense.
Yellowstone is like a better written, bigger scale Dallas.
Right.
In some ways.
Yes. Yeah.
Or maybe Landman would be a better analog to that, because it's about oil barons. Sitcoms were, they were big in the 70s, and they continued to be huge in the 80s. Many of the biggest shows of the 80s were sitcoms. They did get more diversified. The Cosby Show was one of the biggest shows of the 80s, and Roseanne, which was a show about a working class family, really exploded at the end of the 80s. And so you were just seeing different kinds of families. There was also a lot of stuff continued. There was a lot of ludicrous, when you think about like 60s, 50s, 60s sitcoms, and you either have these sort of wholesome family shows like My Three Sons or Leave It to Beaver, or you have these like insane premises like My Favorite Martian or I Dream of Jeannie.
Yeah, things are very
Bewitched.
fantastical. Yeah,
these kind of goofy. And there were a bunch of those in the 80s too. They just weren't as successful.
No,
but
they usually
They
weren't,
kept trying to do those. I used to watch this show called The Charmings. Do you
I
remember
did
that
too.
show?
I watched I loved The Charmings.
Yeah, which
it was on for like a minute. Yeah.
Was it Cinderella or who was it?
It was like
Cinderella
Snow White
and the Prince, and they were living in
fairy
80s
tale.
suburbia.
Right. They somehow, I don't remember how, got transported there and had to live in like modern day life.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. I think it was on for like a minute.
Yeah,
So,
they almost all failed. I mean, there were a few. Alf was certainly, I would put it in that category.
Yeah,
and
I mean
that was
that was popular.
Yeah. We'll talk about those shows as they come up. But it was interesting to see. All in the Family was a trailblazer in this way, and there were shows like Alice in the 70s and Sanford and Son and Good Times. But generally, like seeing working class blue collar people in sitcoms was not as much of a thing until that period. There were also some like workplace comedies that were a little more sophisticated. Cheers is the obvious example of that.
Yeah, and that's one of the, maybe still considered one of the best and biggest sitcoms.
Yeah, for
all
sure.
time. Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to beat it.
Yep.
It's up there with like I Love Lucy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that good.
Yep.
Seinfeld. It's on the, maybe we'll decide by the end of the 80s what the Mount Rushmore
Oh, that's a good idea.
of 80s sitcoms
the
is.
pantheon.
But inarguably, like Cheers will be on it. And then dramas, one thing that changed, I guess, in terms of dramas was that they became more serialized. It was less, there was still certainly like contained storylines, but there were shows like Hill Street Blues and St. Elsewhere, 30-something, that had storylines that would start in one episode and might continue over the course of an entire season.
They would have arcs. I mean, I'm guessing a lot of the television of today, or I should say streaming, shows of today, owe a debt of gratitude to that, because it's all about that now.
it's almost, I mean, it's flipped, right? Like the default now is that everything is
Correct.
serialized.
Everything has an arc now. Yeah.
So much so that when you find like the rare show that isn't that way, like Poker Face was a show I tried watching recently, and I didn't love it, but I loved that it was like she was.
They were like contained mysteries.
Yeah, she was just like she was in a different place in every episode, solving a different mystery with a different set of characters.
Interesting.
And it was very throwbacky to like the days of the contained 60-minute mystery, you know, Columbo and Magnum PI and Moonlighting and every other dispenser, every other detective show of the 80s, Rockford Files, they would have one mystery and that they would solve it by the end of the hour.
Yeah, that's true.
Another big shift was the rise of cable television.
Right.
It was an era of deregulation, as we know, under Reagan. And part of that was the Cable Communications Policy Act of 1984, which loosened restrictions on what you could show. There was a lot of deregulation in TV, just in general, in that period. Children's programming didn't have to be educational anymore, and so you could sell to kids. And so we got an era of, frankly, fabulous cartoons.
Yeah, a lot of cartoons that we loved were really trying to just sell us toys.
They were like basically like, you know, Masters of the Universe was a toy, and then they created the cartoon to sell the toy.
Yep.
And we loved it, lapped it up.
We did love it.
So yeah, lots of deregulation. But one of the things was, probably the most significant one was that Cable Communications Policy Act. And so we got a lot more cable stations, and we saw the birth of 24-hour news with CNN. We had Vietnam was the first big, it's generally historically considered the first big sort of news event of the television era in terms of like you were seeing it as it unfolded. But that became normalized, I would say, in the 80s. And so you have these events like the Challenger disaster, the Gulf War at the end of the decade, like...
or the early 90s.
Early 90s, which were, it just became like accepted that you would have instant access to seeing these things, and that
it would be on all the time.
Yeah, and that as it unfolded, the Iran-Contra affair was another one I remember.
Yep, that's right.
And certainly we've seen that carried to its, I hope, natural conclusion in the world of social media. We almost get things too quickly. We get things before they can be contextualized in any way, and people leap to conclusions. And
it definitely is and now we are where we are. Extrapolation of that, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, MTV was born at the beginning of the decade, and that really changed pop culture, and we'll talk about that a lot. We already have talked about that on this podcast quite a bit because it had such a huge effect on film, how a film looked.
Yeah.
Sports television, ESPN, children's programming with Nickelodeon. There was the Lifetime network came on that was, targeting women's interests. And, we began to see all these channels which looked for niche targeted specific demographics.
Yeah.
And that has only obviously also expanded.
Fragmented even further.
Today, now there's a niche
usually
for
online
everything.
now.
Yeah.
And sometimes I guess there are some streaming channels that are specialized, although I'm not sure how.
I mean, that's carried
happens,
so far today that there's not a lot of like mass.
Right.
I mean, that's what happened in film, right? That's why we get all these superhero movies, because they know everybody of all demographics will go to these superhero movies, and so they just keep making them.
Right.
And we don't get, $30 million movies or $40 million movies for grown-ups that,
Right.
It's a bummer. Well, you have to go to like streaming services to find those things. And, now there's a niche streaming service for every interest that you could possibly have.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but this is definitely one of those things that you hear lots of people of lots of different ages kind of bemoan now, is the lack of common experience and TV, that you can share and talk with other people about common cultural experience. And TV was one of those things. particularly in the 80s. That
I remember when the Golf Channel came on, and I remember having a conversation with a couple of friends where we were just laughing and laughing because we were like, I can't believe there's a whole network just about golf. That seemed insane. And now that seems like
that's
so
pretty broad.
That seems so broad and so mass media now compared to everything.
Yeah.
And then premium cable really blew up. HBO, Showtime, the movie channel, Cinemax. And that was huge for me, obviously, because they showed uncut movies, which as somebody who only had access in my home to network television to watch a movie, it was going to be broken up by commercials, which sucked.
Yep.
And B, it was going to be cut.
Yeah, you weren't going to get the whole thing, right?
So when I would go to my babysitter in town or my aunt or uncle who lived in town or friends who lived in town, and I got to consume as much HBO as I possibly could, I was always like, oh my God, it's uncut and it's uninterrupted. And that was just such a big deal.
Not only that, but these movies were like probably sanitized and bleeped on network television, right? In a way that people maybe can't even imagine now. So uncut meant, you were going to get all the bad words and they weren't cutting anything like that.
You can go on YouTube and watch like excerpts from the TV versions of stuff like Scarface and Breakfast Club. Breakfast Club had they put in fudge for the F word, and so
they would loop it
fudge you, and I'm gonna kick this fudging chair, and it was like fudge every few minutes. It was hilarious.
Yeah,
Smokey and the Bandit had my favorite one. That was the one where you could hear that it was probably. I found this out later when I was working as a professional editor, and we had to do a couple of these, that you don't often have the budget or the schedule or what have you to get the actor in to record the alternate version.
Yeah.
And so it just falls to whoever's around the office.
Oh, amazing.
And usually that's the editor or like, the editor and then the edit bay next door to you. You go and grab them and you're like, hey, can you sound like Jackie Gleason? And they're like, I don't think so. Well, give it a try. And then you just record like another version. And Smokey and the Bandit's the one I remember watching on TV as a kid and being like, what? Because Jackie Gleason, occasionally his dialogue would just drop out for like a solid minute.
Okay.
And whenever they would replace words in network broadcast movies, you could always hear it because it always sounded, even if the person sounded exactly like the person they were replacing. The sound
quality was a bit different.
The sound quality, because all of the ambient sound would drop out.
Right.
Like the score, if there was score, that would just go away for a moment. Or if there was like, if they were standing in a field and you could hear bugs and wind, the bugs and wind would drop out.
Yeah, they didn't have the capability of mixing it. Yeah. Yep.
And so it was just really obvious because you'd be hearing like the bluegrass music of Smokey and the Bandit and hearing like cars, and all of a sudden all of that would drop out and you would just hear some guy going, don't go to bed and don't go home. I'm going to kick you and you're going to lie in the ditch. It was like this nonsense. It was like, what are they? Was the editor drunk? What were they thinking when they cut this stuff in? Wow. None of it made any sense whatsoever. Yeah. I wonder if that one's on YouTube. Yeah. That would be a fun one to watch. Mm-hmm. Scarface is brutal. Scarface is so funny that when they released the DVD, they put as a special feature on the DVD, like 20 minutes of material from the TV version. And it's just somebody doing a really bad Cuban Al Pacino impression.
Wow.
And screaming like the most harmless stuff you can imagine while he's like killing drug lords. He's like
darn the luck. Or,
you pencil pusher. Like just the weirdest like insults that are barely insults. Yeah. That just make no sense whatsoever.
Yeah. Amazing.
Home video was obviously huge. We've talked about that on the show all the time. Mm-hmm. VCRs, introduction of VCRs in the 80s and their mass adoption so quickly. One of the biggest changes that that ushered in, aside from like what we've talked about on the show a lot, which is access through video stores to films that you couldn't get otherwise, was this concept of time shifting. Mm-hmm. Which is the capacity to record something and then watch it on your own time. and talk about something that has like become the norm.
Yeah, it's probably not even a concept anymore because it's just how people view things now.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen interviews with like Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel, and they've talked about how, it's just a microscopic portion of their audience watches them on TV in the evening. It's probably older people, I'm guessing. But almost everybody watches those shows through YouTube clips.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we started with the VCR and then we went to TiVo and on demand. And now we don't even really need that because the streaming services, anything that's broadcast on television shows up on the corporate owned streaming service the next day and you can just dial it up whenever you want.
Right.
Yeah. It's wild. It's changed it's sort of eradicated the idea of appointment television, right? We don't really have that anymore, which is a bummer, I would argue.
Yeah,
in some ways.
For those who've never experienced it, there's kind of a delight in it. It feels special.
Yeah. I mean, especially as a kid, like you would see something that like, the first time they broadcast Star Wars on network TV, I remember my friends and I being so excited that we knew it was coming like from weeks out.
Yeah.
And just building to anticipation of it being broadcast. And then finally the night arrived. We were talking about it. And finally the night arrives and everybody watches it separately at their home. And then the next day at school, it's like all we could talk about.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I was talking about, right? That sort of shared experience that you talk about, that water cooler talk the next day. Obviously for you, it wasn't a water cooler, but playground talk, right? You're all talking about the same thing you watched last night.
Yeah. And I mentioned this earlier, but like there was, it was still largely a pretty white decade in terms of TV, but there was a little more representation for minorities. The Cosby Show, which we'll talk about when we get to 1984, when that show premiered, was a hugely important show in terms of presenting an affluent African-American family in a really warm and kind of aspirational light. But there were other shows too, and not all of them were even sitcoms. Miami Vice, which had a white cop and a black cop teaming up to solve crimes. It was just, that stuff was new. It's hard to imagine that stuff being radical, but it was at the time. Fox came in at the end of the decade to make the big three into the big four. Although really it took the 90s for Fox to find its footing. The Fox network launched in 86, which I had to look up. That was earlier than I thought it was. If you had asked me before I looked it up when I thought Fox came on the air, I would have guessed something like 89. It felt like an end of the 80s thing, but I think the reason for that is
that's when it really picked up.
It took
I
that
think.
long for it to like to really catch on.
Because that's kind of when The Simpsons comes on the scene as its own thing, is 89, I think. But it started before that with things like the Tracy Ullman Show and maybe even Gary Shandling. Was that earlier
that
than
was
that?
Fox.
Yeah.
It had a very kind of sensationalistic element to it. Like it was like kind of trashy. Like it was America's Most Wanted.
That was some of it, but I feel like it was also...
It was debuted on Fox.
Edgy comedy, though, too.
Yeah, Married with Children.
Yeah.
But Married with Children is a trashy show.
Well, I'm thinking about Tracy Ullman and the Gary Shandling Show. I mean, those...
Yeah, but those shows were
edgy
were
comedy.
not hits.
Right, but they were on Fox, and
they were
I
on
watched
Fox,
them,
but I'm
so
thinking in
that's how
terms
I
of like
remember
the
them.
stuff that kind of took off culturally. It was stuff like Cops and Married with Children, and like it was just I mean, they had like Herman's Head.
Yeah,
they had some weird. Weird
they were willing
sitcoms.
to try some
they
things.
Felt felt scrappier, and I think because they were so far down in the ratings, just generally. I mean, they didn't have broad coverage in the United States. I'm guessing for
I don't even know
the first few years. I'm guessing there were vast portions of America where you probably couldn't even get Fox because the way they came in through local syndicated stations.
Right, yeah.
And it wasn't like ABC, NBC, and CBS where they had programming that would run through a good chunk of the day. Fox came on for like 3 hours or 2 hours, maybe even. Maybe they didn't even cover the entirety of prime time. In fact, I don't think they did when they started. But they were only on in prime time. It's not like they had morning shows or afternoon.
Not at first. Eventually they did, but yeah.
Eventually, yeah. But when they started, they were pretty rinky-dink. And so they had deals with syndicated stations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we can't forget, again, they birthed one of the biggest and most long-running shows ever in The Simpsons. So, huge.
Still going.
Yep,
Well, yeah,
still
that was the
going.
other thing I was going to say was they were, because they were smaller, and I think there was less demand on them to, in the beginning, to score those kinds of ratings, they could give these shows.
Right.
I mean, why did Herman's Head stay on for like a couple years? Might have even been on longer than that. I mean, that show was terrible.
Yeah, you're right. I guess it was on for a little while.
Did I ever tell you I had dinner with Herman?
You did.
One
Yeah.
night?
Well,
Yeah.
though I don't know if you told these folks, but yeah.
Yeah, I had sushi with Herman from Herman's Head.
I can't remember
He was
his name.
His name was
The
William
actor.
Ragsdale.
That's
which
it.
was his name.
Yeah.
He was dating a friend of the sister of a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. So we all went to get sushi.
Yeah.
This was like
Wow.
maybe a year or two after Herman's Head was a hit.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah. He was also in, he was the lead in the Mannequin sequel.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
William Ragsdale.
You know who else was at that dinner?
Who?
Because it was a friend of his. It's Paul McCrane, who played the red-haired curly guy from Fame.
And Fame. Mm-hmm.
And he was also the guy that melts in RoboCop.
I believe he was also one of the he was like a mean doctor on ER, if you remember ER.
Oh, yeah,
He
that's
was
right.
kind
He
of
was on
sort
ER,
of like
I
a
think.
mean surgeon or like
Yeah.
sort of a villain character.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was a nice guy. He told me a story about going to use the bathroom at a restaurant, and because I was such a RoboCop fan, so I just wanted to talk to him all night about RoboCop.
Okay, yeah.
And he told me some story about a little kid coming in and throwing a notebook and a pen underneath the door of the
Wow.
public
Of the stall
toilet
he was
that
in?
the
Yeah.
stall he was in to get his autograph while he was trying to do his business.
The life of
the
a
kid
star.
was a big RoboCop fan.
Wow.
All I could think was, I know he's telling me this story because it's funny and it's ridiculous, but I also kind of understand where the kid was coming from.
You're like, I might have done that.
Those were my thoughts. Yeah.
Well, we'll get more into Herman's Head, I assume, the year it comes out.
Let's hope.
To give people
Maybe we should
the
do a
premise,
whole episode, Herman's Head episode.
But there are things now that like echo Herman's Head a little bit. So I'm just saying. We'll get
There's
into
worse TV on now than
Yeah.
Herman's Head for sure. But Herman's Head was bad.
Yeah.
The miniseries boom, that was big.
That was huge.
Yeah, that
Talk
was
about
like-
appointment TV.
Yeah, that was event television in the 80s. Stuff like Shogun, The Thornbirds, North and South, with your boy Patrick Swayze. Mm-hmm. And my favorite, which was V.
Yes.
And V, The Final Battle.
The all-important V.
Yeah, miniseries is big. So maybe we'll do a miniseries episode. We'll certainly talk about them as they
We
come
absolutely
up. For
should.
sure.
Yeah.
Prestige dramas, quality television, stuff like Hill Street Blues, St. Elsewhere. I think these were the first shows to kind of win every Emmy in a given year.
They were prestige television at the time. Hill Street Blues was cops, I think, and St. Elsewhere was doctors,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and there were others, but those were two that I remember. Those were just totally adult shows. I never watched either of those shows as a kid.
They were too grown up for me. I
Yeah,
was like not
they were-
interested. Yeah.
Yeah, but they definitely they certainly paved the way for stuff like
Oh, yeah.
The Sopranos and later on the HBO Prestige.
Absolutely.
Series.
They were that of the time.
And it went in hand with what we were talking about earlier, which is the serialization
Yes, arcs.
of drama too.
Yep.
Yeah. Syndication, again, because of deregulation, grew in the 80s, and there were just more and more independent TV stations than ever before, like an expansion of the number of licenses that were being handed out for TV series. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Illinois, and we had a number of syndicated stations that we were able to get, and I watched them constantly because they showed weird stuff. I mean, they had tons of hours of programming to fill, and
Yeah.
that's where I saw most of sort of like the genre movies that I fell in love with when I was young. They would show those all night, and they would just show like the crappiest old sitcoms and stuff from the 60s and 70s that I never would have seen if I hadn't had the syndicated station to show me that stuff.
Saw that stuff. I think that's where a lot of cult favorites come from too, like that I'm sure we'll talk about. Like you said, things like Star Trek: The Next Generation was actually a syndicated show, but is obviously a huge favorite.
Yeah. Because the growth of those stations, there was more money to be made from syndication too, and you saw a real, not that it wasn't there before, but it really became a thing in the 80s. The principal desire of TV producers was that they had to get to the number they needed, which I think was 100 episodes.
Oh, that seems right, because I know the 100th episode is usually a big deal.
Yeah, you couldn't syndicate a show until you got to
that's right.
100. I think it's 100, but
that
maybe it was
right.
more.
No,
or
I think
less.
that's
I don't remember exactly.
I think that's about right. Yeah,
but yeah, I mean that's still a thing today. That's where most of the money. In fact, a lot of shows will run in the red until they get to syndication. But there are famous stories of people like Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld who were made, who've made hundreds of millions of dollars each off of syndicated television deals. Ted Danson made his fortune off of, he was being paid. He was the first guy to make $1 million an episode. That was a big deal in the 80s for Cheers. But all of his fortune, I'm sure, came from the syndicating. That's where the
big money is.
Show.
And that's, you have to hit about 5 seasons for that, I think, of a TV show.
Yeah, about 22 to 24 episodes a season. Yeah, you have to be on a while for sure. But I think that's also why you see, it'd be interesting if somebody wanted to do a study of this, to look critically at the drop off in quality in the 5th season or whatever, because a lot of shows, they push it to get to that number, even though the show is creatively dried up and the people don't really want to be there anymore. Right. It's well, if we do one more season, then we're a syndicated show.
Yeah, but you got to get that golden egg, right? The goose that lays the golden egg of syndication. So
I mean, some of these shows are it feels like they have their own channel. It felt like for years, every time you and I went anywhere and stayed in a hotel and turned on the TV, it was Big Bang Theory on every single channel.
True.
It was one cow, how much play are they getting out of this?
They were getting
show?
A lot of it.
Wild.
Yeah.
And as Lisa was saying, there were a lot of first-run syndicated hits, which was kind of a newer thing then, too. I think you mentioned TNG.
Yep, Star Trek: The Next Generation. My favorite.
A lot of people might forget that Baywatch, it started as a network show, actually.
Did it? I didn't. I thought it was syndicated all the way.
No, it did a season on NBC and was canceled, and then was independently produced after that. Hasselhoff believed in it, and he was right too, because it became the biggest show in the world.
Yeah, but let's be real. That was the heart of that show was a syndicated show.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know syndicated shows, it seems like it was born out of that. But yeah.
There were some, sort of event specials. We'll talk about them as they come up. Live Aid is one that has gotten a lot of play because it's the anniversary of it is 2025. But there were others too. Who Shot JR? Cliffhanger episodes really became a thing in that era. Not that they weren't before, but there was a lot of attention heaped on some of them. That was probably the most famous one.
That's from Dallas, the show Dallas. There was this big Who Shot JR episode.
At the end of the 86 season, JR is shot by somebody off screen. Yeah. And then that's all anybody would talk about that whole summer was who shot JR.
Yeah, it was huge. Yeah. I keep every time.
The Simpsons spoofed it with Who Shot Mr. Burns, right? And I think it turned out to be Maggie.
Yeah, it was. I think it was Maggie. Not to ruin it for everyone. But I keep thinking of The Simpsons, The Simpsons being its own TV juggernaut. And so many of the things we're talking about, they've spoofed like bad looping, bad word replacement and things like that. They spoof all this stuff. So it's so interesting to think about that as we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Daytime TV moved from being a wasteland of sitcom reruns of old shows from the 60s and 50s even, to original programming. And a lot of this was on syndication, but not all of it. Some of it was on the networks. And so Soap operas, which had been big before, continued to be big and maybe even like peaked perhaps in the 80s.
Could be.
The Luke and Laura wedding on General Hospital.
Oh my God,
Wasn't that in the 80s?
That was, I think that was, Luke and Laura were big in the 80s, and I think the wedding was in the 80s. That was one my mom watched, was
General Hospital.
Yeah, and Luke and Laura was definitely an interest. So
yeah, I certainly had babysitters that would not miss their stories, as they say.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very important.
All my children. I had a babysitter that called it All My Kids.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, you're spending too much time with that show if you're calling it All My Kids.
Yep.
But talk shows were another one. Oprah obviously found her fame in the 80s, but there were others. Phil Donahue was huge.
Talk shows like that were so big in the 80s.
Yeah, Sally Jesse had a show. Lisa Gibbons had a show. Jenny Jones, the comedian, had a show.
That's right, she did.
She's the one that got in trouble because one of her guests murdered another one of her guests.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
I didn't remember that. Wow.
Because they ambushed him on her show, and he flipped out and later on killed the other guest. Court shows were another thing. People's Court premiered in 81.
Yeah.
Judge Wapner.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I had a student who went on the People's Court.
Really?
Yeah. She told me that, this makes sense, of course, but that the show covered the judgment.
Okay.
Which I didn't realize, and paid each participant for their participation. And flew her out there. She was in Philly. And the People's Court flew her to L.A., paid her like a small stipend, and put her up in a hotel. And paid her a stipend for being on the show, and then also covered the judgment. Which
so
was
you mean, by that, you mean if they were ordered one person to pay the other $800, they'd pay the $800?
Yeah, the show paid.
Okay.
I don't know if they always did that, but they did it in her case.
Okay, interesting.
And that was made clear that was how that was going to work.
I guess how are you going to get people to come on? That would be a way to do it. Yeah. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just like in cinema, where things started to move toward the youth market and the teen market, we had the explosion of the slasher cycle and also teen sex comedies and the John Hughes movies. There was also a move toward kids and toward more juvenile audiences on TV too. And the biggest place you saw that was MTV, but also we were flooded with new Saturday morning cartoons, a lot of which were tied to toys, like we were saying. There were teen sitcoms like Degrassi Junior High, right? And Square Pegs with Sarah Jessica Parker and Saved by the Bell.
Huge.
California Dreams.
Yep.
On the during the morning. Kids Incorporated.
Yep.
Yeah. And the sort of the influence of music videos, which was a youth-oriented thing in series like Miami Vice, but also, of course, in movies, as we've discussed many times over. Globalization, that was not as big a thing here, but certainly you saw it. There was, you could see Japan's anime industry affecting Saturday morning cartoons.
That was a big one. That's what was noticeable.
I know you were a fan of Voltron,
I was a huge Voltron fan. Yeah, I don't know. I can't explain it, but I loved it.
Yeah, Robotech was
even
another
I think
one.
Kid Video was one. That's another.
Yeah. You
Cartoon.
also were a fan of Masterpiece Theater and Mystery and some of those PBS shows.
Pretty much my whole life, ever since I became aware of it. Mystery, all of that
PBS
stuff.
was kind of the biggest importer of like BBC.
I think so.
That's how Monty Python in the 70s found its footing in the U.S. was through college kids watching Monty Python's Flying Circus on PBS.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I certainly remember the Benny Hill show on that.
I do too.
That syndicated channel that I was talking about. They would run that thing at like 10 o'clock on a weeknight opposite the news. And as a kid, you don't want to watch the news.
So you're watching Benny Hill.
When you only get 4 channels or 3 channels, there's not a lot. You don't have a lot of choice, and so it's over to Benny Hill, which was.
Yeah.
I always just remember being very confused.
Yeah, I'd watch it, but I didn't know what I was watching. It was
chasing women in and out of doors. That's my memory
sped
of
up footage
of him chasing like buxom women.
Yeah,
like
that was usually
in and out of various doors.
There must have been
more.
more.
While
maybe
you
there
heard
wasn't more to it.
polka music
Yeah, no, it was a very specific, I can't remember. Yakety Sax is, if you go look up.
Yeah,
that's Benny Hill at its core. They played it all the time, as far as I know.
Yeah, but every episode seemed exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't remember much about it.
You really could just watch the same episode.
What you explain is what I remember of it. I suppose there must have been more to it, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. Lisa mentioned this earlier, but there was sort of more irreverence in the comedy, some edgier comedy. So we mentioned Married with Children, but also in Letterman, which I was a huge Letterman fan. I loved the original show.
You're talking about the NBC Late Night with David Letterman.
Late Night with David Letterman, which where I was from came on at 11:30. I guess 12:30 where you grew up.
Yep, 12:30.
So pretty late. As a real little kid, I obviously didn't get to see it. But when I got a little older, I would catch it, and I was just like so mesmerized by David Letterman.
He's mesmerizing.
And his sense of humor.
Yeah.
You and I are still huge fans to this day. We watch his YouTube show.
I didn't get to watch. I probably wasn't old enough to watch him in the 80s, but I definitely watched him in the 90s, both on NBC and CBS, and love him. Yep.
And then finally, just the thing that I think we'll come back to most over the course of talking about all of these various years individually in the 80s in terms of TV is the shift, which is cultural shifts. The kinds of things that that television producers and networks were making shows and films about.
Yeah.
Just as it shifted in the cinema, so it shifted in television. And a lot of it came from, the cultural mood and how it changed in the Reagan era toward individualism, optimism, commercialism, consumerism, a fascination with wealth, mixed with like some anxiety over things like drunk driving or
drugs, eating disorders.
Yeah, the Cold War.
Yeah, the Cold War.
And just a lot of great escapist popcorn entertainment. That's one thing I do miss about 80s TV. A lot of it's really dumb, and especially if you look at it today, you're like, wow, this is really dumb. But it was also just being produced for fun.
Sheer entertainment.
And it seems like the kinds of shows that, I don't know, maybe I'm just being a get off my lawn guy here. Not that would be new to this show or anything, but it seems like a lot of the shows that are made today that are just meant to be escapist entertainment are crappy reality shows.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of the shows that people are like, oh, this is a really good show, like The Pit or Adolescence. I mean, those are just a couple really recent ones as of when we're recording this. They are really good shows. I agree. But there's no fun to be had in them.
They're just despair.
I don't know. I haven't seen White Lotus, as we mentioned earlier, but I don't know. Game of Thrones was fun, but it also had like horrible stuff in it. Yeah, it can be really dark. And I don't know. Part of me misses the A-Team and MacGyver and Magnum P.I. and Knight Rider and these shows that were just sheer popcorn.
Even things like Moonlighting, which were really legitimately good shows, were on the lighter side. Yeah.
So, do you have anything to add that I didn't mention?
I don't think so. I think that's a pretty comprehensive
80s TV
overview.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
At least how it changed.
We'll be talking.
As we get on the ground here and start looking at it year by year, I think more things will come up, certainly.
Well, and some of the shows you heard us name check, if you don't know what they are, I'm sure they'll come up.
Yeah, we'll get to them.
And, obviously go to YouTube and look them
up.
They're all there.
We'll be deep diving on putting on the hits.
I'm sure it'll come up.
It'll definitely come up. I loved that show.
I did too. Yeah. You'll find out.
All right. So, thank you. Whether you're a longtime listener or new to the show, thanks for listening and we hope you enjoy this sort of new miniature endeavor. We will at some point get back to being exclusively an 80s cinema podcast, but for the next however many weeks, we're going to be getting into TV because TV is fun too.
TV's fun too.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye. You've been listening to The Long Rewind. The program is produced by Dustin Morrow and hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli. If you enjoy the show, please consider hitting the subscribe button, Leave us a good review on your podcast app and tell your friends about the program. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.